Now, a word of warning before I even start, so let's kick off with that. I'm going to be talking about JavaScript, the language. I'm not necessarily going to be talking about libraries, such as jQuery or MooTools or Prototype or things like that. I'm basically going to try and stick to standard JavaScript. If I do introduce something which looks bizarre and it's because I'm using one of the main libraries, then I'll let you know. But I really wanted to basically concentrate on JavaScript, the language. We've all probably, if we've done any ASP.NET programming whatsoever, dabbled a little bit in writing a bit of JavaScript to make our controls work on the browser. And if, like me, that's all you did. And at some point about 2 years ago, I thought, you know, JavaScript is a language on its own. And I really want to learn how to use JavaScript in the best way possible. So I started off by saying, well, heck, it's got the word Java in the language name, so it must look like every other C language out there. So C, C#, C++, Java itself. And unfortunately, it's not. When the guys at Netscape first started writing the language and describing the language, they chose a C-type language just for familiarity reasons, but essentially they went on some completely different direction. And if you view JavaScript as being just another C-type language, then you're going to come unstuck. JavaScript is something on its own, really, and that's what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 for sure webinars. So this is webinar number 1, and I've projected out another 3 after this one. And I will be doing others which will actually introduce things like libraries and the DOM and manipulating the DOM and all that kind of great stuff. So, JavaScript. If you've looked at JavaScript at all, you'll notice you don't actually declare variables with any type whatsoever. So it seems a bit bizarre for me to start off with webinar number 1 talking about types in JavaScript when there's no simple way to actually declare a type in JavaScript. There are actually 6 types in JavaScript, and only 6 types in JavaScript, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So let me just move on. Great. My PowerPoint has actually frozen. Oh, here we are. So there are 6 JavaScript types. And here they are. They're Boolean, number, string, null, undefined, and object. The one thing I want you to actually notice, apart from the actual 6 types here, is there is no class type. Coming from C#, we're kind of familiar with the whole concept of declaring a class, which is, if you like, a template for a bunch of objects, and then you new up a new object based on some class. It doesn't work like that in JavaScript. Funnily enough, the word class is actually a keyword in JavaScript. It's just not used, so you can't actually declare anything with the word class. However, JavaScript does not have a class system. So here are the 6 types in JavaScript. We're going to start off with the first one. First one is pretty easy. It's Boolean. So there are 2 values here. There's true and there's false, just like in every other language practically. The type of operator is a grand little thing. It will actually return a string, which is the word Boolean. The constructor function is Boolean. I'm not going to talk very much about constructor functions here. In essence, the way you create an object, there's several different ways of creating an object. One of the ways is to use the new keyword, And for Boolean, you could actually create a new Boolean. Let's quickly flip over here and show you some code. So I'm going to jump over into Firefox. What I've got here is I'm using Firebug, which is an add-in for Firefox, and it's basically a DOM and HTML and CSS and JavaScript debugger for Firefox. It's an add-in to Firefox, and it's fabulous. Basically, there are things like this for Chrome. IE has a developer mode where you can slip in and look at the DOM and look at JavaScript and debug JavaScript. I'm just using Firebug for now. In essence, with Firebug, there's a console, which is this particular screen here. On the right-hand side here is where I can type in some JavaScript. I've just typed in a quick function here at the moment. Don't worry about it. In essence, it's a way of reducing the amount of typing I'm going to be doing to show information over here on the left-hand side. Firebug is a great way to play around with JavaScript. So let's quickly create a Boolean here, and the simplest way of creating a Boolean is to declare a variable. I'm declaring a variable called b, and I'm setting it to true. I've just created, if you like, a Boolean. Now I can just display that over on the left-hand side here. So on the left-hand side, when I click the run button here, it actually executes the JavaScript that I've got in my console here and displays it over here in the results window. So here's the JavaScript it executed, and it this call to CL actually calls console.log, which is a special Firebug add-in to the add-in library for JavaScript. It returned true. This undefined here is Firebug has this wonderful propensity to actually return the last value from the last function called. The last function called was CL. If you notice in the function CL here, I'm not actually returning anything. In JavaScript, this is the first thing you'll notice, JavaScript functions always return something. If you don't explicitly have a return statement, it will return the value undefined. So that's all Firebug is showing over here. So what I was saying over in my slide here is to never ever use the constructor function called Boolean, and here's the reason why you should never use it. Let's throw this away, and instead we're going to declare a new Boolean, and we're going to set it to, let's set it to false for a change. This is not going to do what you think it's going to do. I'm going to run it. And notice it's actually showing me something different than it was before. It's showing me that it's an object, not a primitive, and it has the value false. This is where it gets really weird. So if I'm going to write an if statement now, and I'm going to say if my new Boolean is actually true, this is what I think it's going to do. I'm going to display the word true. Oops. And close that off. Now run it. And notice this is the result of this call here. But what I've done is I've created what I think is a new false Boolean, so it should not actually execute this statement here, but obviously it is executing that statement here, there. The problem is that I've created an object which is the Boolean, and this particular expression evaluates the object as being a valid object, and therefore it is true, no matter what the inside, the Boolean inside actually is. So that's the biggest reason for not using Boolean, and it's just very confusing, so just ignore it. So let's go back over here. Oh, type of operator. Let's quickly show that. Let's quickly remove all this and replace it again with the var b equals true. Oops. And this time I'm going to display type of b. And just run it. And as you see over here, this is the code I'm executing, and it's going to display the value Boolean. Type of b is the string Boolean. Okay, Boolean, easy peasy. Let's move on to the next one, which is similarly easy peasy. The type number. Now in C# we have a plethora of different numeric types. We all use int, we all use double, we sometimes may use byte or something like that, but there are lots of different number types or numeric types. In JavaScript there is just one. The type is number, and underneath it's a double. There are no integer types in JavaScript. Type of operator will return number. The constructor function is actually number with a capital M. And again, it's one of those things which is there for completeness, but you should never actually use it. And one of the things it does have is a bunch of properties which are constant. So there's number.max value, number.min value, number.nan, not a number, number.negative infinity positive, or so on and so forth. And there are some conversion methods or functions added to the number constructor to do things like convert a number to a string or to an exponential string, fixed string, and all that kind of stuff. But the main important thing here is to understand that number is a double. So if I jump back over here, this time I'm going to declare value n, and I'm going to set it to 3.14, and let's just run this just to show that it actually returns the value number as we have over here. And obviously I could do things like display the number itself. Let's run that, and 3.14, and so on and so forth. Now, the number type has a couple of special values. One is not a number, and we'll be able to test for this with is not a number. There's infinity as well. However, and you test for this with a function called isFinite. But you've got to watch out when using these functions. This is the second bit where we get caught out with JavaScript. JavaScript was written as a scripting language to make animating or making your websites interactive in some sense. And so there's a lot of cases where, to make things easier for the developer, JavaScript, the interpreter, will coerce values for you. So let's see how we can show this. Coercion in JavaScript is basically taking some value and coercing it, converting it into the type that the function expects. So here I'm setting n to be a string here. Let's take this out and just run it so you can see the type of n is actually string, and there it is. And now the bizarre thing I can do now is, let's say, well, is this string n, is it not a number? Bizarre thing is, it will actually say it is not a number. In other words, it is a number. I've converted it, or rather JavaScript has converted it for me. So if I call isFinite on this as well, it's going to return true. Like that. If I have some bizarre string here, say hello, let's see what happens this time round. So yes, we're still a string. This time isNan is saying it is not a number, and this time isFinite is saying, well, it's false, it's not finite. What is happening is it can't convert the string hello into a number, and what happens at this point, let's create another one here. What I'm doing here is I'm forcing a conversion of the variable n, which is a string, and because I'm adding the unary plus operator at the front, it's going to coerce the string n into a number and then store it in n1. Just to show you, n1 is going to be a number. isNan is actually going to say it's not a number. What happens here is the conversion fails because it can't actually find a valid string representation of a number here. So it's actually going to return and set n1 to isNan to not a number, nan, and obviously isFinite is going to be false. So just be aware of that. To be strictly true, to use isNan and isFinite, you should check that the variable is actually a number first before actually calling them. So if I, for example, write a quick isNan of my own, let's call it isNan2, it's a function. I'm going to pass some value in, and I'm basically going to return, first of all, I'm going to check that the type of n is a number. So if n is actually not a number at all, it's going to return false at that point, and also the original call. And then I can call isNan2 here. Let's take out this isFinite and then run this. And here we're actually seeing that it's, well, actually that was the same value as before, so 3.14, where we're actually doing a conversion here. Whoops. And run that. So it is a string, and my super duper isNan2 function is actually returning false because n is not actually a number. Notice here I'm using the triple equals. We'll talk about that in a later webinar. So that's number. Oh yes, because there are no integers, yet there is bit twiddling. What actually happens with the JavaScript interpreter is it'll take a number if you're using bit twiddling, so you know, you're shifting left or shifting right with the double left angle bracket or the double right angle bracket thing. What is going to happen is JavaScript, the interpreter, will convert your number to a 32-bit integer, do the bit twiddling, and then convert the result back into a variable of number type. So bit twiddling is much, much slower than in compiled languages like C#, where there are integer types. JavaScript does not have integer types, so just be aware that if you're doing something like, hey, I want to divide by 2, therefore I just shift right by 1, it's actually going to be slower than just doing the divide by 2. String. We quickly saw some strings just there. It's actually a sequence of 16-bit characters. Do note, though, there is no car type. And string has a bunch of functions declared on it so that you can, for instance, there's a length property, so you can find the length of the string and so on and so forth. It's not a strict Unicode string. I warn you now, different planes are not supported. Type of operator returns string, and the constructor function is string, but nobody ever uses the constructor function string, because to declare a string, as you saw earlier on here I am declaring n as a string, and I just declare it as a value, a string value. So don't forever, whatever you do something like var n equals new string of some value. No point. Just declare it, just as in C#, just declare it like this rather than like that. So that was string. It's pretty simple. Here's a really interesting type, the null type. Null type has only one value, which is null. Compare this with the Boolean type, which has two possible values, true and false. The null type only has one value, which is null. There is no constructor function, and bizarrely enough, the type of operator will actually return object and not null. It's a bit bizarre, this. Frankly, it's catches everyone out. They do typo of some variable and hope to see the value null come out, but no. So with null, it's easier to ignore type of completely and just compare against null if you have a variable. And similarly, undefined is yet another type which only has one value, which is the value undefined. In JavaScript, you can have variables which are undeclared, in which case when you evaluate them, they are undefined. In C# you can't do that. If you use a variable, it has to be declared somewhere. In JavaScript, that's not the case. And the other case is in JavaScript, if you actually do declare a variable but do not assign anything to it, then it also has the predefined value undefined. Let's show this in some code. So let's first of all not declare a variable at all, and then I'm going to display the type of some variable called j this time. Now I haven't declared j at all. So now I run this. I haven't declared j at all, and so the type of j, which is an undeclared variable, is undefined, as it says down here. Ignore that second undefined again. It's Firebug returning the value of, in fact, let me show you this. If I return something like done. There we go. I run this again. This is the return value of that function, which is this function call here. So let's just leave it like that for now. So j, not declared, and it has the value undefined. Or, yes, it has the type of undefined. If I now do something like this, so I'm declaring it but not setting it, and run it again, it's exactly the same. Whoops, I didn't actually press. There we go. It's exactly the same. It has an undefined type. Type of is undefined. If I actually just display the value, and we get the value undefined out of it. Let's do this. So j is actually null this time, just to show you what null does. So j is declared, and it has a value none. Type of will return the value object here. And if I say something silly like this, I could actually do this. Just to make it really explicit, and you see the type of is undefined here. So undefined is this nice, nifty little type. Again, only one value, which is undefined. There's no constructor function. There's no point in creating some object which is undefined. We've seen type of operator is undefined, and the biggest gotcha in all of JavaScript practically is that undefined is not actually a keyword. I can, and they warn you against this in lots of different places, I can do something stupid like this. Say, oh, let's create an undefined variable and call it, I don't know, I exist, it's a string. And now watch what happens when I run this. I declare undefined to be some string. I set j to be undefined, and the type of j is, as you see down here, the value string. This is appalling. For some reason I don't really know. Let's just delete that now. So now undefined is deleted. The reason I'm doing, I ought to do something like this as well. Let's delete j as well. Oh, I can't do that. I've got to do it separately. Let's run that. Okay. Now, the reason for doing this, actually deleting my variables after I've used them, is that I've been merrily adding these things to the DOM here. So here's my B variable. So Firebug actually displays the current document object model. And there was my B variable, which I was using earlier on. There should be an N variable down here somewhere. So this is my N variable and my N1 variable. Here's my CL function, which I want to keep. I've been merrily creating these variables, and they've been appearing in this window object, which is my global object for JavaScript. I've been, if you like, merrily declaring global objects during my little tests here. This is bad news, and essentially I really don't want to redeclare undefined, so I better delete it at the end. So it's been deleted. You won't find an undefined variable down here. No, it's not there. So back to my console. So that's undefined. The other fun thing is you may actually see code like this. Because undefined can be declared as a variable, it's not a keyword, you may see sometimes code that looks like this. And then CL, actually let's declare true again. So what I'm doing here is I've created a function called CL, which is my little play function here, and I'm passing one parameter to it, but it's actually declared with two parameters. Because I never use the second parameter, this parameter called undefined within this function is actually going to be undefined. So I could say console.log, .log might actually help, of type of undefined. And if you now run this, ooh, nice one. Can't even do that. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Ignore. You may see that, and I've also seen the other variety of declaring your own undefined variable. I have messed up something somewhere. That should help. It can't compile. There we go. That's what it was. That was going on. I missed. There we go. Now we can say console.log of type of undefined. There we go. Type of undefined is undefined. Yeah, apologies about that. It's the fun of doing things live. The other way of messing around with undefined is to use the void operator, which in JavaScript is totally and utterly bizarre. Let's say x equals void of, I don't know, 0. What happens with x is let's take this out. What happens with x is, with void is, I should say, is that it's an operator whose return value is always undefined, the value undefined. So you may see void 0 being used instead of undefined. By the way, this trick here where you declare one more parameter than you actually need is actually used by jQuery. It uses that trick. I don't know if I run this. So this undefined here is the result of this void operator. So void is an operator that always returns undefined. Let's go on to the next slide. And finally, the final object that we have is the object type. The object type covers everything else, essentially. It's for objects. Arrays are objects, a special type of object. Functions are objects. This is something I'll be getting to in the third webinar in this series. Functions are objects. Notice, by the way, the way I declare my functions is I'm explicitly saying to myself, I know this function is an object because I'm assigning it to some variable. The other way of declaring a function is similar to what you're used to in C#. So function CL2 takes some expression, and we basically call console.log of the expression. That's another way of declaring a function. That's called a function statement. This is a function as object. So functions are also objects, as we'll see later on. And everything else we haven't seen, like regular expressions, they're objects too, and so on and so forth. The constructor function is usually object, but it depends. We can mess around with that and show other, create other constructions and constructors and everything. Type of operator always returns the word object, no matter what kind of object we may have. So an array, for example, will actually return, the type of operator will return object. Let's quickly show you that just as an example. It gets a bit weird. So here's an array with one value in it, and I run this, and there we are. Type of this array X is object. It's not array, or something like that. I could actually, I think if I'm right, if I do x.constructor, I can't remember where this, it's an array, that bizarre thing there. Let's take this out. Bizarrely enough, type of a function returns the word function. So this is, weirdly enough, not all objects do return type of object. or the type of operator returns object. Functions, for example, actually return the word function. But as I say, we'll see that later on. That's all I really want to talk to you about objects, because the whole of the next webinar is about objects, where I will be discussing things like prototypal inheritance, because there are no classes in JavaScript, and so on and so forth. So at that particular point, we're roughly done for this particular webinar. We've looked at all 6 types. And the types are Boolean, number, string, null, undefined, and object. And as I say, we'll look at the object type later on at the end of this month on the 28th of February. Now, I see there are no questions, so you basically have a little while now to ask any questions that you may have about what we've covered so far. And
hey, Julian, while we wait a few
sure.
minutes for questions, let me just fill everyone in on what's coming up the rest of this week. Tomorrow we have, or actually, sorry, Wednesday, February 9th, we have MVVM with DevExpress charts, how you can use MVVM concepts with the DevExpress charting platform with charting evangelist Brian Wood. And Thursday at 10 a.m., reporting in Silverlight with reporting evangelist Seth Juarez. And our final webinar this week, also on Thursday at noon Pacific Standard Time, MVC Combo Box extension, cascading combo boxes with ASP.NET and MVC evangelist Mahul Harry. So from Peter, Julian, you say, is it possible, oh, yes, Peter, it is possible to download this presentation. We are recording it, and it will be available either tomorrow or Wednesday at tv.devexpress.com. I'll post that link over here.
Yes, in essence, Peter, we take all of our webinars. Somebody is recording it in the background, and essentially we top and tail it, render it to the standard formats that we support at tv.devexpress.com. That does take a little time. Rendering is not an instant science, so it'll probably be tomorrow morning, but we'll see.
Will the slides be available? Yes, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I must say that these webinars are mostly going to be see and do type webinars. So I don't, that code I was typing into Firebug, I don't have any copy of that. So by all means, watch the webinar, pause it, and play around in Firefox and Firebug yourself, or Chrome, or IE, or Safari if you use Safari. Do it yourself, play around with it, see what kind of things you get out of using operators like type of and the declarations I was doing, and so on and so forth. By all means, that code is not going to be visible. Later on, the webinars are going to be more complicated and require more code, in which case I'll actually provide the code as part of the downloads with the webinar itself.
From David, any other common mistakes declaring variables, additional best practices?
We'll be covering that, especially in the 4th webinar. So far, we've just looked at the primitive types, and we haven't really looked at object at all. So, for Boolean, number, and string, declaring variables, especially at this stage, just use the form where you're actually declaring a variable to be a constant. So, for instance, my var b equals true or var b equals false. That's a great way of declaring Booleans, and the only way you should be doing it. For numbers, it's var some name equals and then some expression which evaluates to a number. We'll be talking about common gotchas with numbers and strings later on, and coercion problems. And the same with strings, just declare it as some constant string. You won't go wrong with any of that. With null and undefined, Essentially, yeah, set some variable to null or set some variable to undefined. That's about it. So at this stage of the game, it's all pretty simple, and I'll be going into the whole, you're declaring something in global scope later on when we talk about scopes with regard to functions, which is in webinar 3.
Great, and yeah, your next webinar in this series, Julian, is February 28th on objects. I think you mentioned that.
That's right.
Just so everyone knows.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, any other questions from Jose? Where can I get a good JavaScript compiler?
JavaScript compilers don't exist really unless you're talking inside the browser. Every single browser has a JavaScript interpreter, and these days those JavaScript interpreters are such that they actually pre-compile code. And if you read news about the new versions of Firefox and Safari and IE9 and Google Chrome, they're all talking about the speed at which they interpret, compile, and execute JavaScript. There is, I believe, and I haven't really investigated this at all, there is a compiler you can download for, that's written in Java. I don't know much about it because I don't actually do any Java work at all, so it's fairly useless for me. And basically, it's a standalone interpreter for JavaScript. I don't know how good it is, how quick it is, or anything like that. As I say, JavaScript interpreters tend to be within your browser.
Okay, let's see. Oscar says, excellent presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was a bit light this time, I must admit. Not tomorrow, but next time at the end of the month, we'll be really delving into some nasty object stuff.
Wow, nasty. That adjective. And so far, okay, that's all the questions that I see, Julian.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. As I say, bit light, but see you next time on the 28th of February.
Yes, so the February 28th is JavaScript Part 2 on objects, everybody, and you can register for that online at devexpress.com/webinars. If you want to learn more about all of our DevExpress products, we have hundreds of product tutorials up on the DevExpress channel as well at tv.devexpress.com. And again, if you missed anything from this webinar or you want to review any of our previous webinars, tv.devexpress.com. Thanks so much, Julian. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for choosing DevExpress.